boy, Dr. Damo here. Now this video is going to be a smidgen different from what you're expecting, especially given the wanky corporate video that you just watched. Now, trigger warning, I'm definitely not like that person, and this will be a bit more on the nose of the true Dr. Damo flavor. But I like being transparent, so today I'll be covering a lot of what went on under the hood leading to the Kickstarter, and how that leads to the state of things now. While it's a heck of a roller coaster ride, I get some of you are full of that ADHD happy day, give me that content now vibe, and just want the what now? Now, if that's the case, scroll on over to the timestamp on screen. We bookmarked it in the chapters and in the description. Now, back to the meat. I'll start off with a little bit of an origin story. What a happy little Damo digivolved into Dr. Damo, graduating my PhD in Japan and then coming home. I definitely lost a lot more than the hair on my head during that bout of hard yakka, so I exiled myself deep in the south of South Australia. One day, during that exile period, one of my mates who worked on me with another project hit me up. Had a bloke in the neighborhood, he needed the good old Dr. Damo touch. Turns out it was a video game based on Ned Kelly. Ned shooting, 2D action, Aussie based posting? Oh, count my ass in, I said, quite literally. Now, I've been doing this for a long fucking time, and I've developed the habit of critically analyzing the potential. When I'm given a project, I give it a one-over. Lord knows what kind of spiders be hanging in the back of that shit. I honestly remember nearly vomiting when seeing the game the first time around. Besides being totally broken function-wise, the game needed a lot of elbow grease on visuals, gameplay, UI, and interactivity. Still remember being polite in my feedback, but boy, this game really needed some serious help. Normally, the technical is the really hard part for video game development, but that's why you get the doc in after all. Still, rough as the game was when it was presented to me, there's huge potential for something awesome to come out of it. So I wanted it, of course. Decided to cheat myself out and gave a really cheap rate because we all know video game development is usually quite expensive and artists tend to be wanting more of the bigger cut of the pie. It's okay, no problem. Hi-ho, off to work the Gnome Lord goes. When I evaluated, I definitely wanted a rebuild of all the things going on under the hood in the technical department. It was okay for student standards, but if we wanted to do anything scalable or make the game more impressive in any way, we needed to go really deep. And ding! The core technical of the gameplay was done a month later, though there was much more that needed to be done. I had to hop off. Wouldn't you know it, being hired into a full-time work for a couple of years really eats it out of you and leaves you with no time for fun and play. So I told PB, go fix up the demo, give a bit of a plan, let the players have a bit of a time with the first couple of levels, if he had any hopes of getting it funded by a publisher or by any other government entity. Fast forward a couple of years later, went through a few jobs, got tired of it, started beer, and one of the first lessons I learned was the value of something really cool. You would think that would be the backpack equipment I wear day to day, but nah. When I presented beer and what beer does to an industry and business advisor, I showed them many wondrous things that we were working on. Some of the VR, some of the XR, and even the kitchen sink. No, not really. Including Ned and a couple of the other game projects we were working on. The advisor turns around and says,
"Holy crap, that's amazing! Why haven't you brought this to market yet?"
Assuming the backpack, given it's kind of specialized, I said with a disappointed face, "Well, she ain't ready, mate. Backpack PC is
not."
Slamming his fist on the desk.
"Not the backpack, you dunce. Go finish the Ned Kelly game. I want to play it."
And, well, holy shit, he's right. But beer didn't really have the rights to do anything with it. So instead, over the year of beer, we managed to build a team, good workflows, and more importantly, a bit of that fat cash. Perfect for dumping on a marketing plan. Now, took an evaluation of my options, could have gone to a private publisher, but honestly, sometimes it's not for the best interests of the project and gets really hard when you have to negotiate. The other alternative is the governing body, but given it's Ned Kelly, and if you don't know anything about Ned, he tends to be anti-government, doubted they'd be along for it. So we needed some serious funding to finish it, and take a guess where you guys came in. Ultimately, I decided instead of putting the budget that I had put aside for my AR headset research work, I put the AR headset down and gave PB a bell and flew him out to meet the brewmasters at beer. Now, I gave my heartfelt pitch, showed him the love and care we put into everything, and he reciprocated. Obviously, can't give you all the sneaky deekies behind the deal we arranged, but we both agreed and we wanted Ned to happen. Now, how this worked was beer gets the IP so that we could push hard on the game. PB was to keep creative control, mostly because I know personally how publishers tend to be in this regard, and Beer was eventually to hire PB. Now, I wanted this personally because I saw how passionate PB was on the stuff that he was doing and his excellence as a project manager. Finally, deal signed, time to get to work. Taking another look at the game, now that I was away for a good year, I saw a good chunk of the design was done for the levels and layouts, but the core demo of the gameplay wasn't finished. There wasn't a tutorial in place. The art drastically needed an overhaul as well. The current art style was a little bit too dark and nearly impossible to work with on a technical level if we wanted to make really smooth animations. All the sprites were drawn, each frame by frame, making modifications really difficult. Typically in this scenario, you'd have to redraw all the sprites, not good enough when you don't have a great budget. The art was also impossible to read on screen from a user perspective. If you took one quick look at the old screenshots, you'd have a hard time finding yourself in the scene. The gameplay was a simple shoot and discover. Now, personally, that's okay for an indie, but it's not unique, and we need unique if we're gonna end up in the Kickstarter world. There was also no in-depth story? What? Why? We've got Ned motherfucking Kelly. He's one of Australia's biggest icons out there, and most of the world doesn't know about him. Have to have a story in there. And finally, while technically the foundations were built okay, there was a lot of optimization that was needed if we were thinking to put it on the Nintendo Switch or any other console. Thus, combined with a 300k internal goal for fundraising, whether that be combined from Beer's personal coffers or the Kickstarter wasn't related, it made it a really hard sell to the public. Now, given Beer already had 2 industry projects in the wind, I figured this ought to be something I could do in my spare time. I already had a couple of junior developers just pips farting around doing nothing, so we assembled the development team. Overall, pipeline typically was for me, during the day, I'm managing the development team and wearing my beer hat. And then at night, I'm putting in the final polish, writing narrative, doing the world building, and furthering the game development on the technical aspect. PB at the time, when possible, helped in his free time. Before I even thought to bring it to Kickstarter, we needed to do a lot with the game. First was the story. Now, believe it or not, the original story boiled down to Ned gets captured, somehow he breaks out, has to deal with zombie cops. Now, that's really neat for a simple indie project. Definitely what I would consider memorable, and certainly not a story I believe worthy of the Kelly name. Makes it even harder for you folk across the waters to get into. While Ned Kelly sure was a badass icon from down under, he's more of a ghost among you folk. So, spent a good week straight over the Christmas holidays last year to buffer up. Best part of that was taking a really deep dive on Australian history. But not all of our history is great. We all know the great nope that happened back in the day. Australia has a pretty dark past after all. So, at the advice of our residential queen of narrative, I sought some counsel from First Nation individuals. We all very quickly agree that it's not a good idea to include it, mostly because we aren't really representative of what that culture is. And I certainly don't want to tell a story that it's really their right to speak of. Not to mention, we all kind of understood it really wasn't a great period historically for that generation. So, no way, no how, we don't touch that. Luckily, we have plenty of other cool stuff from that period in Australia's history.
Fear.
Fanny Finch, fraggle Aussie names at work, I swear. Overall, the new game summary that I came up with was pretty much as follows. Basically, Ned ends up at the end fighting a whole bunch of zombie cops, and the zombie cops because the government decided to take that big old power brew from a rotten apple that was growing underneath the ground, had a special property of making people super strong, super fast, but of course, when you get super strong, super fast, you end up done as nails. You catch me so far? Good! Once Ned was captured, actually, all of the entire Kelly gang ended up getting experimented on, and now Ned not only has to worry about that, but while he was locked up, the government was still giving all of the power brew to the citizens. You following me so far? Well, after that, of course, nobody wants to start getting shit given to them. Citizens revolt, put the bastard power brew all over the place, so exploding a bunch of depots, and then Ned wakes up and goes, holy shit, there's an entire wasteland that's now corrupted, has to fight his way through the bush and putting everything back into line. Hopefully you caught that much of the story. Not gonna give you all of it just yet because, well, kind of defeats the purpose of playing the game. Overall, the new game summary was pretty good, and it even came up with a bunch of unique features to the game. The first one of them was, well, around the power brew from the rotted Granny Smith apples. And the initial mechanic I had was just to slow down time. I did plan for a whole bunch of Ned-centric abilities. New weapons were added based on some creativity around the fact that we invented refrigeration technology. New collectibles based on our vast history and the lovely info cards that you saw on the loading screens. I also took the effort to create some cinematic cutscenes to go with the in-depth lore, and my personal favorite, an adorable little fly companion just to piss you the fear off. Seriously, he's great. But the more I added, added and modified, the more concerned PB got. And while the game was becoming more polished and more accessible, it was starting to divert away from his original simple vision of Ned as a badass spitting one-liners in a platform shooter. We tried our best, compromising wherever possible. We managed to get there in the end, because outside of this, Beer's missions were clear on the game. 1. Make a new trailer to accompany the new narrative I came up with. Get the demo complete. As a bonus, optimize it, pop it on the Nintendo Switch. I figured if people can see that the game is really good and actually functions really well on the Nintendo Switch, they would believe the project is quite feasible and actually we know what we're doing. We had a short time span to do this, I ain't gonna lie. We had less than 6 months to settle all of this, but I've pulled harder f***ing miracles out. After all, I'm motherfucking Dr. Damo. Tech is in my blood. Marketing is not my strongest point, however. And it was here that we brought on an advisor to the project. He was an expert in Kickstarter fundraising, in particular games, and he was absolutely fantastic in the information that he provided. But when I saw some of the plans that they had put together and some of the advertisements, I saw 2 fundamental problems on a personal level. The visuals definitely didn't look up to par. Even if it's what's more attractive in the marketing world, it's definitely not Beer's kind of flavor. Seriously, just look at it. I could see a lackluster of content as well. The advisor said that overall the product offering was quite weak, relaying back how I felt about the original game concept. And then the biggest problem I had with it, we were holding a lot of the content back. More importantly, the demo and the game trailer, and both of them are our strongest assets. I definitely felt it wasn't transparent as to what you're getting. I was fully confident that if we tried the game more, they'd look past the somewhat lack of the product offering. Overall, the numbers themselves didn't lie. Not that I fully understand the algorithm. There weren't a high number of clicks on the ads during the initial teasing phase. I was seeing the marketing plan not working, and in the background, with me working on the game at night, I ended up getting a rigging from some unexpected people. Some really strong YouTubers actually, people that I actually watch on a regular basis. First, Nerdslayer liked what we did, ran a mid-roll on one of his biggest videos, and the good lads over at Garn Comedy f***ing loved what we did. So I personally played a little hooky with my actual real-time world job to fly on over and say hi. Seriously, it's really weird meeting what you Zoomers consider a celebrity face-to-face. Also, another side note, Murph's a total motherfucker as well. With these 2 in our pocket, despite warning signs saying we should delay the launch of the Kickstarter, I pressed on. The demo was already looking quite sharp, even if it was handicapped in the gameplay, and the marketing itself was really weak. I figured we never get a chance like this. This is one of those few times in my life I can't say I quite called it right. I quickly started having to move to 80-hour work weeks in order to keep the brewmasters on target with our industry projects and the game development team on target with the Nintendo Switch and Steam store demos, while concurrently training them because this is actually a few of their first projects. I even built up a neat free Steam key distribution systems for your emails, and if anybody was paying attention, it took me a bit to get it right. Really fucking hate web development, eh? PB seeing this and me overextending myself ultimately sacrificed his full-time employment to hop aboard the beer train, with Beer paying PB a part-time salary, not to put huge financial burdens on Beer while keeping PB afloat. This, however, added further worry to me. Suddenly I'm now responsible for his financial outlook, on top of the lean ship I was running to put more money into the game. Like myself, he wanted this to work. I accepted this, and unanimously, everyone in the senior management within Beer agreed. Less admin and management time for the doc, more time on the tools where he shines best. So I let PB aboard the Beer train. We even brought in a special lass on the marketing tools. Steph really drove us hard behind the scenes, and honestly, I have nothing but thanks for her. We managed to get the marketing on point and we were seeing the clicks. I thought all is well until the final couple of weeks leading up to the Kickstarter. I'd finished the Nintendo Switch demo with the Brewmasters and it was accepted and queued for the store, so the technical was complete. I then started to revisit all the marketing and Kickstarter materials for a one-off approval. Sufficient to say, they really weren't up to scratch. 37% for marketing became an internal meme. Worst yet, in my absence, managing our industry projects, they had significantly dragged out of line, leaving a series of ups upset clients. Felt a little bit like I was finished fighting one war only to come home and find everything on fire. Pushing myself further to a near 120-hour work week to drag everything back in tow. Barely holding it together. Honestly, never ever do this. If there's one recommendation I can give, my motivation and passion began translating to aggression and desperation. In the lab, I was whip cracking really hard at anything that wasn't done by the book, introducing further friction between myself and senior management in order to drag things back. While I was never abusive or expletive or demeaning in my mannerisms, I started coming off as condescending and definitely not what I'm about. And honestly, at this point, I'd started breaking. Launch night, well, we ended up having that launch party. It was one of the few times I was truly happy in a long time, seeing many friends I'd not seen in years, and you motherfuckers actually had me crying a few times. Behind the scenes, things couldn't have been worse. While it was working, clients were happy again, and we were seeing the numbers doing reasonably well from the start of the Kickstarter launch. They weren't doing enough for us to hit the internal numbers. And then diagnosing the problem further, while we were seeing the clicks, the conversions to buyers just weren't there. Combine that with the feedback from the players that the demo that highlighted the same critical issues I'd been visiting before was pretty clear. The only way that this was going to be pushed hard enough was that the product needed to be better. In one last desperate push, I resuggested to PB the modifications I proposed earlier, including abilities unique to Ned's tin can attitude. PB had enough, ultimately exited, and facing this, I couldn't knowingly take any back of money. Morale was gone, and it felt like the whole weight of the world just crashed down. I had no choice but to pull the plug on the Kickstarter. Now at this point, probably noticing the massive tone change in my voice. Just like I'm exhausted doing all this voicing and writing, honestly. How the f*** do you YouTubers do this for a living? I'm really impressed. I was, and still am, exhausted. Even with what I've just told you so far, there was still a lot of other things happening in my life, not limited to me moving house and having to move to this new lab space, further adding to the stress. At the end of it, I sat there, had to really rethink everything, and felt at the bottommost point of my life. What felt to me was that I was all by myself, and without the one piece of my soul that makes me, me. My seemingly endless motivation had all but dried up. Ultimately, I'd failed for the first time in my life in over 2 decades of experience, and not only that, driven away a close friend in the process. Sufficient to say, I did not take that well at all. Unlike during the PhD days though, when I faced the worst of my mental states, I had an amazing support system. I've got to work with some truly amazing people over the last 6 months, and even got to fangirl speaking with some of the content creators I love watching. Even one of the lovable crew that worked with me on Ned showed me and put their passion into it, and I was impressed with their output, especially given this is the first time. Finally, but most importantly, I got to interact with all of you. Usually I'm at work all day and I actually don't give myself time to, socialize. And this has helped pull my brain out of arguably one of the most troubling and tumultuous times in my life. With the help of those supporting me, I've picked myself up now, and I've started resetting up the new laboratory. And right now, we're rebuilding the office to fit our needs and getting it back to work on the industry projects that fund beer. And I guess that leaves one last question. What happens with the IP now that the Kickstarter can officially be called, well, failed? Well, first, let me explain a few of the details of the contract I am allowed to, which, if beer was unable to satisfy the conditions of, the IP would be returned to PB. The first of it was at the end of a given period, which we had until the end of September to satisfy this. And given if that fails earlier than expected, the IP is held in limbo until we either renegotiate a new contract to allow beer to keep the IP before that given period, or it's returned back to Pol. Now, my morale took a big hit. I was unable to answer the question of what to do next. Steph suggested, and I ultimately agreed, to ask you what you wanted, and what you guys agreed with me. We all want the game. Now, I may have driven a close friend away, but I decided to reach out knowing this. And while he never likely will work with my grumpy ass again at colleague level, he agrees that beer has the heart to take Ned across the line. So we're now negotiating a new contract that is fair to his wishes and to the Ned game moving forward. We'll likely be able to come to such an agreement, and we'll continue to work on the game as a passion project until either we can find a publisher who will support us, or we somehow bankroll it ourselves. Now, we all know that this kind of procedure takes some time, and we will keep you in on the loop. So what are you going to do until then? Well, the marketing team within beer has been learning a lot more about the crazy tech that we work on, and a lot of what we're internally laughing at and calling Damo lore. Plus, I enjoyed interacting with all you lovable So now it's my turn to attempt the whole YouTube and social media fun. What's that going to include? Well, episode arcs, where you get to learn some of the crazy shit I've done across the globe the last decade and a bit, some of the fun bits and bobs about the tech I wear on a day-to-day basis, my thoughts on XR and the general development scene. I might even try some of those god-awful tech pieces that are out there already. Just thinking about it makes me want to vomit. And then to force me to take a break now and again and have fun interactive streams with you guys where either we're playing games together or I'm playing games and chatting with you. That might include anything from, well, your generic action games to music games, which my personal favorite. I even have a full VR sim setup where I've actually been learning to drift as part of one of our other projects. So links in the description as to where you'll find the Discord where we normally hang out and other fun resources, and I guess like smash subscribe. Steph, do I really have to say it every fucking—
Just do it!
Really? I hate that corny ass shit. Like, smash, subscribe, because I'd love it if you were to hang up and join me as we serve a bearder future for all.